So I wanted to make a quick video that I got an idea from recently, from remembering the whole, drama I had to deal with when I criticized WUWA. In one of my videos, I mentioned that HSR is similar in generosity to WUWA. Now, I never was trying to argue that it's on the same level or better, except for the second Annie. I will stand on this. HSR's second Annie just easily beats WUWA's Annie. It's not even close. But aside from that, I fully recognize that the average pulls per patch, even if they're the same for HSR and WUWA, they don't equate to the same value because WUWA has 10 less hard pity and they have guaranteed weapon banner. Plus, the power creep isn't as bad, although we don't talk about the signature weapon already being as bad as HSR Lycones, right? So, Tectone brought up an argument against my own. And this is where I got the video idea from. He said, WUWA has higher value pulls than HSR because of how the game state is and because of the less pity on banners. And I thought to myself, this is true. It is true. Once again, I wasn't trying to argue HSR is as generous or more generous. I was just arguing that they're a lot more similar than a lot of people like to admit. However, it's true. So, now that I am playing Genshin, ZZZ, HSR, and WUWA all at the same time, I've cleared endgame on 3 of them. Unfortunately, I can't clear WUWA endgame yet because I simply just don't have built characters. I'm not UL 60, low level Forte, only like 3 or 4 characters are level 80. You know how it is, right? I need at least one more throwaway DPS that I can use to solo one of the towers with to full max TOA, right? However, I want to talk about the average pulls per patch in every single game, right? So let's get straight into it. HSR's average pulls per patch is 105, right? And if anyone's curious, WUWA's average pulls per patch is also 105. Already gone through this, I don't want to waste your time. HSR obviously has more power creep, worse banner rates, and worse, Lycone rate. So, I completely understand where people are coming from. WUWA wins over HSR. Well, what about ZZZ? ZZZ has 124 average pulls per patch. You'll notice this is a decent, jump, 20 more pulls. However, the point still stands that if you lose a 50-50, WUWA's banner system would be better, right? For the simple fact that you do, let's say, well, WUWA's soft pity's around 64, right? I think the average 5-star pull rate is around 67 to 68. So you do 67 times 2, it's 134. Assuming you lose 50-50, that's what you need to, pull for to get that limited 5-star if you have to go to soft pity twice. For ZZZ, I'm just going to assume it's the same as HSR. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But HSR's soft pity is around like 76, I believe. So, you do 76 plus 76, that gets you to 151 pulls to guarantee the limited 5-star. So, they are close, right? They genuinely are close. And I'm actually just now realizing I think ZZZ actually slightly edges out WUWA. But either way, they're close, right? They're close, and that's really all that matters. Extremely similar rewards wise. Of course, though, ZZZ does recently have more HP inflation and more power creep with Miyab. However, after Miyab, no one has really been doing power creep, so it's mostly just the HP inflation talks recently. So, what have we learned so far? Well, WUWA is obviously overall better in terms of literal pull value over HSR, and it's about equal with ZZZ with the better weapon banner system, right? So, who's left? Well, I saved the best for last, gentlemen. It's Genshin. And the reason I saved the best for last is because many WUWA CCs have gone on record criticizing how stingy this game is with how bad the pulls per patch are. which I 100% agree with. I have been an advocate for Genshin players getting not as many pulls as HSR, but probably 80 to 90 a patch in my opinion. I think that being the average, being able to guarantee at least one 5-star is really the sweet spot, and hopefully, you know, this game will eventually get to that point. However, currently, the average pulls per patch in Genshin is around 67 to 70. So, what does this mean? Doesn't this mean that clearly WUWA blows Genshin out of the water? Well, no. In fact, WUWA's pull value is worse than Genshin's. Ironically, right? So what do I mean by this? Well, Genshin, for one, has the way, and I mean way better 4-star options than ZZZ, than HSR, and then WUWA. However, I'm mostly going to emphasize HSR and WUWA here. HSR hasn't had a new 4-star in like 9 months, and there's currently, I look at leaks, 0 plans for a 4-star to be in the works for the entirety of version 3. So high likelihood we go over a year with no new 4-star in HSR. And in WUWA, it's kind of a similar situation, although not as bad. It's been around 5 months since Lumi, and current leaks are saying we won't get a 4-star until 2.5. Right? So it'll be around 8 months gap between the last 4-star being Lumi. So we can clearly tell that WUWA has a 4-star situation that isn't all too hot, while Genshin's 4-star situation is, to be honest, very fucking hot. Like, the 4-star options in Genshin are very top tier most of the time, and comparable to some 5-star supports at times, which is incredibly valuable to many people's accounts who obviously can't spare to share 1 or 2 limited supports constantly between the same teams, right? Having good 4-star options is really healthy. Next, we go into the whole power creep and HP inflation thing. Well, Genshin is in a very similar spot to WUWA, in which the power creep does exist and the HP inflation does exist. However, it's been so incredibly slow that for a game that I believe is nearly half a decade old at this point, people are still completely clearing endgame with 4-star teams and even V1 teams, right? They're using Zhong Li, Hu Tao, and the Big 25 with Jing Shou and still clearing, right? So they're kind of similar in all these aspects. So what is it that makes Genshin's pulls more worth it than WUWA's pulls? Well, it's the fact that Genshin only releases 1 new limited per patch, while all the other games that are being compared to here get 2 new limiteds per patch. And I do have to be honest, if you add this up with the average pulls being 67 to 70, and then you double it if they were to add 2 characters per patch, then you get the number of 134 to 140 pulls, which is 10 higher than ZZZ, which is already on average character banner wise better than WUWA. But this game obviously, once again, doesn't really have a power creep or HP inflation issue all that much, and the 4-star options are just way better than the other games I'm comparing it to. So, ironically, the game that WUWA CCs, and even I, criticize for having a abysmal amount of bad patches or bad pulls per patch, ends up having the highest value for their pulls amongst all the other games I mentioned. And I also want to bring up in this video, right? WUWA is a gacha company, $1 billion one at that, with Kuro now being near the 2 billion mark. And I don't want to doom post WUWA, right? I want to kind of clarify this. Saying that a game has power creep isn't a bad thing, right? There are levels to power creep. There is HSR power creep. There's like Miyabi power creep. And then there is, Genshin power creep, which is incredibly fucking slow. It exists, and you can acknowledge it exists. It doesn't mean that you should quit the game, or, you're not going to be able to clear endgame content with older characters. It simply means that slowly, your older characters are losing more and more value over time, and newer characters just have much greater value, right? I wanted to say this because I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, you're saying there's power creep in WUWA. You come here to attack us, you Hoyo shill. And that's simply not the case in the slightest. I simply came to the game, criticized it for literally what I've criticized every other Hoyo game for. Because if you were to organize my videos through popular, you'd see most of my most popular videos are talking about HSR's MOC HP inflation, its power creep problem, maybe even a Genshin video here and there, but mostly it's me shitting on Hoyo, or Hoyo's predatory tactics, with rerunning characters that will be replaced by someone who does something very similar along the same path a few patches later. I've constantly been calling out Hoyo on their bullshit, and WUWA will simply be no different. However, this video was made to simply talk about what game has the highest pull value, right? The highest pull value in any of the games, it's Genshin. Genshin wins despite receiving the most hate for being stingy with its pulls per patch. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.